The Senate has officially voted to confirm Judge Neil Gorsuch to be the 9th justice on the Supreme Court, and this is a huge victory for corporate America because he will undoubtedly do the bidding and rule in favor of large multinational corporations. Now, the question is, how did all of this happen? How did Republicans get their guy on the court after blocking Obama's nominee for a whole year? I mean, they were rewarded for obstructionism, right? Well, in part, we have to thank Democrats for this. So Joe Manchin and Heidi Heitkamp last week stated that they would be voting to confirm Neil Gorsuch, and just days before the vote, Senator Joe Donnelly joined Manchin and Heitkamp, telling CNN, after meeting with Judge Gorsuch, conducting a thorough review of his record, and closely following his hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee, I believe that he is a qualified jurist who will base his decisions on his understanding of the law and is well respected among his peers. Now, let me remind you that Joe Donnelly, he is a Democrat, not a Republican, who just said that about a conservative Supreme Court justice. So, if there's anything that this tells us, it's that Democrats are incapable of remaining strong, and when push comes to shove, they are willing to cower in fear to the Republicans. Now, thankfully, there were a couple of exceptions, and Jeff Merkley courageously stood up all night trying to filibuster the confirmation of Neil Gorsuch, but unfortunately, it didn't work. Now, his efforts may be commendable, but it doesn't matter because what Republicans did was they did a dirty trick. They changed the rules to make sure that Neil Gorsuch was forced on the court. So how did they do this? Well, once the Republican Party realized that Democrats would be filibustering the vote to confirm Neil Gorsuch, at that point, they needed 60 votes to override the filibuster. So they decided to change the rules and just do away with filibusters. They nuked it as an option and made it so that way you can no longer filibuster Supreme Court nominees. So that way all they would need to get their guy on the Supreme Court was a 50+1 vote majority. So the Huffington Post explains Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and his fellow Republicans pulled the nuclear rules trigger Thursday, gutting the filibuster rule for Supreme Court nominees after Democrats blocked President Trump's conservative pick, Neil Gorsuch. We need to restore the norms and traditions of the Senate and get past this unprecedented partisan filibuster, McConnell said. Wow. Now, he said this moments before rattling off procedural speak that set the rules to change in motion. That's just shameless hypocrisy right there. He and his party obstructed Merrick Garland from getting on the Supreme Court, and regardless if you love or hate Merrick Garland, I don't like the guy, but the fact is that Obama was the one who was supposed to nominate a justice to the Supreme Court, and they blocked him from doing that. And Mitch McConnell has the nerve to say, or to lambaste this quote-unquote unprecedented partisan filibuster. They wouldn't even allow a hearing on Merrick Garland. They broke the filibuster record, and Mitch McConnell, in his infinite hypocrisy, is now bemoaning Democrats trying to stand up after they stole this nomination away from Barack Obama. It's just unbelievable. They have no shame whatsoever. They don't care how hypocritical they look. They don't care if it makes them look like jackasses. They got what they wanted. And now we have an extremist, just as extreme as Scalia perhaps, on the Supreme Court again. And let me remind you that your new Supreme Court justice had $10 million in dark money behind him. So it's dark money because companies and corporations and billionaires were spending this money anonymously. So we don't know who's funding him. So if something that they're involved with, if they're involved in a Supreme Court case, comes up before Neil Gorsuch, we don't know whether or not he'll be forced to recuse himself, or we won't know whether or not he should recuse himself because we don't know where that money was being, where it came from. So this is a disaster. This is really, really bad news. I mean, in a week just filled with horrible news, this is the cherry on top. This is kind of the cherry on top of the shit sundae that we've been force-fed this week. It's ridiculous. Neil Gorsuch, corporate America's best #1 choice, is now on the Supreme Court. This is a huge blow to anyone who was fighting to get money out of politics, to anyone who wanted Citizens United to be overturned. It's just a huge punch to the gut.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.